Welcome to the Space Out Podcast, where we chill out, chat about, and space out. I'm your host, Luca, a.k.a. LucaTony, and today we're going to talk about a very serious situation that, due to being in the Twitch ecosystem, there's no way I haven't seen, and that is the incredible movement around exposing abusers, physical, sexual, and of power, and just generally just shitty people that have just exploded in the past 2 weeks. There have been a lot of people coming out with their stories and different angles about all of this, and it's just been awful seeing all of these things on my Twitter timeline, but they're important to highlight, and I have a couple of things I want to talk about. I'm in no position to talk about the details of what happened and pass ultimate judgment on anyone, as I have gladly never had anything like that happen to me. So if you're interested in knowing more details on the specific situations and what people think, I'm going to leave a link to a paste bin to the stories in the description of this podcast episode or in the pinned comment if you're listening on YouTube. So first, I want to talk about the Twitch Kittens, which is a somewhat smaller thing that happened in the streaming ecosystem, if you will. So the too long didn't read. Kyle, a.k.a. Modest Mayoral, was abusing his position of power in the Twitch Kittens community, which is a group of live streamers on Twitch, to do plenty of less than admirable things. So the things that are being alleged towards him, which all of these have evidence in the forms of screenshots for the specific events that have occurred. So take that as you will. But the alleged things are, he uses his girlfriend's account to catfish other streamers into being private or sending more explicit texts. He constantly pushed members in the community into doing free work for him, especially artists, which there's a specific instance of an artist not giving discounts to the Twitch Kittens community. So Kyle, like a Modest Mayoral, made like a small brigade of people that constantly berated the artist for a good amount of time. At least that's as much as I understood from the tweets explaining them. There have been a lot of things coming out for the Twitch Kittens community in terms of the amount of people. So there's just a lot of angles that there's possibly not enough like time I have in order to read all of those. So if I get something wrong, I apologize. But multiple times he tried to absorb projects streamers had and make them part of the Twitch Kittens brand. There is a fellow streamer I know that was starting a podcast, and Kyle, impersonating his girlfriend, contacted that streamer in order to get her to make the podcast instead of branded around, her, just like Space Out Podcast is branded around me, but instead make it around the Twitch Kittens brand. But yeah, like I said, there's literally so much stuff to unpack in this one, and it's already been discussed in the community on Twitter for almost 2 weeks at this point, that I won't touch on it for too long, aside from what I've already said. I just wanted to bring this up as a means to raise awareness that everything that's been happening in the Twitch community at large can happen, and especially happens to small streamers, as bigger streamers tend to have more power in the platform and tend to be more prone to have abusive tendencies, not even as on purpose sometimes, just because of their status and the fact that because they are so influential, they could like inadvertently cause a lot of pain and drive people to do certain things for favors or things of that matter. Again, there's an entire Twitter feed by Miabyte or Super X Invader, and she explained it in such good detail with tons of receipts and everything, and I'll leave that in the description and in the pinned comment. With that said, this is like the big headline news, if you will, the Twitch blackout. So while I mentioned the Twitch Kittens situation, there have been plenty more situations in Twitch recently that all have been around a sort of hashtag #MeToo movement stories regarding bigger streamers abusing their power and their status as a mean to either ask for sexual favors or ask for, or just like physical or emotional abuse and all that, and they started to pile up, and people began to at Twitch on Twitter, asking them for them to take action against the accused parties. And for like a good amount of time, Twitch didn't do anything on Twitter. They just stayed silent about the situation and let it pass for a little bit. So there was a big plan made by some streamers to not stream on Wednesday, the 24th of June, in order to have a quote-unquote Twitch blackout for Twitch to notice and, have to take action, because in their words, it would affect their Twitch's bottom line, and they would be more incentivized to act upon the current controversies in the community. In terms of my take with how the Twitch blackout was organized and what the intent of the Twitch blackout was, I feel like it wasn't the smartest move. Let me explain why, though, because I do agree that something needed to be done, and we'll get onto that something did indeed happen, but we'll get onto that later. Big streamers won't do anything. And like in my eyes, I don't think big streamers will stop streaming, and just because some people in the smaller communities and the smaller streamer landscape have had awful situations, which, although like it's extremely shitty, and like, yes, of course you should stand with people, especially in such a harsh and like awful situation as abuse situations are. The big streamers, like, streaming is their job, and the bottom line is that like those people do it on the daily because that's how they get their money, and they can have sponsorships lined up that they cannot cancel and all those things. And it also brings me to the fact that smaller streamers, some people, even though it's not the smartest idea in my opinion, live from the Twitch daily income. And even not daily, like some people, I stream on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, right? If I had streamed on Wednesdays, and let's say I lived off of streaming, like, what do I do if I want to support Twitch blackout, but I also need the money from my streaming in order to, pay rent and all of those things? Luckily, I still live with my parents. I still have not started university, but imagine a situation for someone that Twitch is their income, So what I think is a better idea is to promote streaming, in fact, but with links to the situation that is happening and the Twitter longers and resources and information for people to get informed and to improve the community, instead of, silencing yourself on purpose, which many people have, an issue against, because, like I said, people have a rent to pay and all of those things. I will disclose that I'm not immune because I did something similar for the Black Lives Matter with the blackout thing. I do look back on it and, realize that maybe just putting a black image on my Instagram and doing the bare minimum was, doing the bare minimum. And I could have done so much more to help, such as put links to important things and all of those, which I've done on my stories. But, I'm not immune. I learned from it, and I feel like moving forward, we shouldn't silence ourselves in order to make a point. I think we should make our voices even louder by promoting important information and those types of things. Well, even though I've basically railed Twitch Blackout for not being the ideal situation and that I dislike how we have done a lot of things, it has worked because Twitch officially responded on the 24th and said that they will be reviewing each case individually, giving each case the importance it deserves, as well as giving it to the authorities it deserves, because obviously a rape allegation is not the same as an abuse of power inside of a community. And they're also currently reviewing their hateful conduct and harassment policies in order to make changes to adapt to the current situation. So, what I would like to say in regards to that is that the noise we made on Twitter was good because it got Twitch's attention, and eventually they took responsibility, and we're looking towards a better Twitch community in the future. However, the execution of the Blackout itself, like I've talked about, not so much. And I think we could have done a lot more, myself included, as a community to give people who are struggling to speak out or who have gone through similar things in the past or who might go through things in the future, because no matter how much we tackle it, I'm sure that there will be awful people, regardless, the information and the resources that they need. And finally, this one's a biggie. It's also regarding Twitch, but OfflineTV, a group of streamers, streamer house, one of the biggest streamer houses on just content creation as a whole, had a big emotional abuse and sexual abuse case. Just as I was writing the notes for this episode. It was just for me, it was very conflicting, and it made me very angry, but you'll see why in just a second. Let's actually talk about it. So the TLDR is that Twitch streamer Fedmeister had not only made fellow streamers Yvonne and Lily Pichu extremely uncomfortable with some very weird and creepy things, to Yvonne, he touched her under the shirt, almost on the waist. He put his hand through her sleeve and touched her on the waist while he was drunk. And Lily Pichu removed her post, but I'm pretty sure from the context, things that I've read, and from small screenshots that I've gathered, that it was trying to take advantage, that Fedmeister was trying to take advantage of her about just breaking up with her ex, while both of them were drunk, and he asked her if she wanted a massage, and even though it didn't get sexual in nature, it was very weird, and Lily Peach looks back on it with a lot of uncomfortable feelings. But on top of that, Fedmeister also talked rumors of each friend behind their backs and tried to turn them against each other, both inside of OfflineTV and with the bigger friend circle that OfflineTV has, in order to get them on Fedmeister's sides, representing only half the story to things he had done, such as the Yvonne situation or whatever. And it all seemed very that's the case of emotional abuse I was talking about. I, once again, will not weigh in on the situation itself and the people, in it, because it is not my place. But I do want to talk about the reaction people are having to the whole situation, because although there has been a lot of support for Yvonne and Lily Pichu and all of the parties affected, there's also been a lot of people with, quite honestly, unacceptable behavior. There's always the usual trolls that, throw hate at Yvonne for thinking that it's canceling or whatever his friend and all of that. But there's more pressing matters than trolls, in my opinion, because there's people that say that, I know you're a nice person. They say that to Fed, even though he had admitted that he had done it, and he confirmed Ivan's and Lily Pichu's statements. There were people that said that I know you're a nice person, that you can get back, and stronger than ever, I hope you get help, and that I believe you're not a bad person, blah, 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 blah. And I feel like those type of people miss the complete point that the Me Too movement at large, and that this situation as well, is trying to convey. You don't know these people. You don't know the people behind the screen. You only know the persona they want to show you. Fed is a super go-lucky, chill out type of person that memes about himself in a self-deprecating manner all the time. But when you look at the statements that his friends have made, they don't hold any grudges against him. And although it was a horrible situation, they say that Fed has a big heart and he's actually a relatively laid-back person and all those things. So you don't know the person behind the screen. And just because you have an idea of who they are because of the actions they do on stream doesn't mean that that's their complete story. There's a reason why I started the Space Out podcast. My stream personality is a lot more hyped up and a lot more energetic than my, chilled out personality like I'm having right now. So the podcast is just sort of in between how I normally are and my stream personality. Because even right now, I'm not on my usual completely chilled out state, because I usually am a lot more quiet and a lot more laid back and a lot more or less, I'm actually a lot more opinionated, while I don't give a lot of opinions here because it is not my right to do so. You just don't know these people. And I think a lot of people are missing the fact that that's the main point of all of this. Another thing I saw is people are trying to excuse his actions for being drunk and having done it with both of Ivan's and Lily Pichu's assaults while drunk. There's a specific tweet that I saw that really irked me that said, okay, but there are people that can't control themselves when they're drunk. Maybe Fed couldn't control himself while he was drunk. I'm not trying to defend him, just saying that there are people who can control themselves while drunk. And to me, that just is insane red flags, because being drunk is not an excuse. Let me just get that straight up. Sexual assault is not excusable, no matter how sober or how drunk, how whatever you want to say you are. He still did what he did. If you can't control yourself when you're drunk, then don't drink. You have no right to ruin someone's innocence, to give someone a lot of trauma on a certain situation for the rest of their lives just because you cannot control yourself while you're drunk. Just don't drink. It's that simple. If you say that it's okay, there are people that can control themselves when they're drunk, you're defending him. This is a textbook example of protecting the abuser. This is along the lines of, this is bad, but he didn't mean it. He wasn't in his right mind to do it. It just completely undermines what happened to the victim as just a lapse of judgment, and does not take into account the countless times that they've probably thought it over. And from what we see in this case from OfflineTV, they have thought it over. And they have talked about it with Fed in private and all of those things. That's something also I forgot to write down in my notes I want to talk about. People are saying that they should have done it in private. And while I do agree that things like these should be tackled in private, they already have tackled it in private. That's the whole reason that they're doing it publicly. Because when they try to do it in private, Fedmeister did the exact same thing he had done before, only presented half the story in order to get people on his side, and it only just perpetuated the cycle that they were trying to help his friend get out of. And if you really think that by not making it public this could have been fixed, I don't know what to tell you, but the world is not as simple, and sometimes people don't learn with just a slap on the wrist. And another note I want to say is that no matter how drunk he was at the time, he denied his actions to Yvonne and Lily afterwards, even after talking to them, and still tried to manipulate people with emotional abuse while not being drunk. So even if you try to excuse and disregard his assault allegations from Yvonne and Lily, his actions are completely inexcusable as a person, and it makes sense that people made a public statement so that they know what fate Fedmeister, did to them, and help other people navigate if they ever do become friends with Fedmeister. So, that was a hefty, very opinionated section. In conclusion, for this podcast, mass movements like Twitch Blackout, although they have the right intention in mind, aren't the best way to tackle these situations, in my opinion. Don't silence yourself. Use your voice to spread valuable information and resources, because even if you have 50 followers, 100 followers, 10 followers, those 10 people will see it, and everyone will be more informed and have the resources, because even if it's just 10 people, one of those people could eventually run into a similar situation, and it is best, if you care for those people, that they know how to tackle with that. And please, for the love of God, believe the victims. Even if at first they don't have a strong case with evidence or people backing them up, don't give content creators a podium to stand on. Content creators are people like anyone else, and they can make mistakes like anyone else. And just because they have a large following doesn't mean that they are exempt from doing awful things that they've done in the past. That also doesn't mean that we should cancel on sight when something comes out. But both sides of the story need to be heard, and you shouldn't blindly believe the victims either. Any form of blind belief is bad, because eventually someone will take advantage of that. Someone will try to cancel someone over either an extremely blown up situation or a completely false allegation. And because people blindly believe it, we will take their word and cancel someone that had not done anything wrong, ruin someone's life and their mental state just because of something they hadn't done. So the same way that we cannot blindly believe the abusers and hold them up to higher standard, we should also not blindly believe the victims. We should give the victims more privilege, as they are the ones with the allegations, and we need to hear the victims out, because most of the times the victims are actual victims and they're not faking this. But we cannot blindly believe. Blind belief is bad. We should not. And I just want to disclose that I looked up to Fedmeister. He was a Latino dude that moved in to OfflineTV as a mere editor. And he worked his ass off, and he became one of the biggest streamers on Twitch eventually. And I used to think about how cool it would be to stream alongside him, like Latino boys represent type of thing, as a Latino dude myself. But what he did was unacceptable. Both his sexual and emotional abuse of his friends is unacceptable, and they should be heavily condemned, because if we let small things like these slip on through the cracks will get bigger every time. Thank you so much for listening through today's episode. It was a wild one to say the least, but hopefully you're a little more informed, and you will join me alongside countless other people out there in fighting for these injustices. Remember that if you want to learn more about what happened, there is a link to a paste bin with all of the links to the things I've talked about. And thank you for spacing out.